Kia ora koutou katoa, I'm Miraz. This session today is about how to use the Web Inspector, an incredibly useful tool in your web browser. First, you need to know a little bit about HTML and CSS, which is what allows the web browser to actually display your web page in certain ways. Then I'll show you how to find the Web Inspector, and then finally a little bit about how to use it. So good luck. We're keeping things really simple for this session. Here's a simple example of a standard blog page. It's got a heading, then there's some paragraphs of text, maybe a photo. Here are my dogs Oshi and Sasha when they looked all clean and tidy one day. And I'm looking at that using a web browser, in my case Safari, but it could be Firefox or Chrome, something like that. In this session we're sticking to looking at web pages, but people could be listening to them, or software like a search engine might be looking at what's behind the scenes on the web page and grabbing up all the text and pictures and indexing them. When you send something to your blog, you probably just write some words and add a photo and send it off. Behind the scenes, the server software, in the case of micro.blog, actually adds in some things called HTML tags. Those tags are special instructions that we can't see when we look at a web page with our web browser, but they tell the web browser about the text and the photos and things in there. The web browser then looks up a style sheet and says, oh, here's a heading, I'll make that big and bold, or here's a paragraph that's normally in grey text, here's a photo, I usually put a drop shadow around a photo, that kind of thing. Tags mark up the text, they come from HTML, and you can see some examples on this web page. But this web page that you're looking at is incredibly boring, so how could we make it look better? Now we need to talk for a moment about styles and style sheets. A style sheet is usually a separate document that the web browser can refer to find out how it should display the various elements in a web page. For example, it might make a level 1 heading centered and green, or perhaps if it's a paragraph it'll use navy instead of black. And maybe you don't want the text just going all the way across the screen, maybe you want to limit it in some way so that there are margins on each side. There are heaps and heaps and heaps of things that you can change in the look of your blog, and we'll look at those in a minute. We'll look at the rules, an example of the rules in a cascading style sheet. Style sheet rules suggest to a web browser how it should display various elements like headings, paragraphs, photos, and so on. For example, at the bottom of this page is a heading, deliberately garish so that you can really see what's going on. The rule reads H1 because it's a level 1 heading, and it says colour, that means the colour of the text should be navy, the background colour should be yellow, the size of the font should be 2M, and it should be aligned, the text should be aligned to the centre with a top margin of 3M. And so you can see below what that actually produces. Now, this is the kind of thing that you will see in the Web Inspector, so we'd better move on to that. But there's a little bit of a caveat. So the Web Inspector lets you look behind the scenes of your blog or any web page. One thing is, I'm using Safari on a Mac, and you have to actually turn it on before you can even learn that it's there. So you have to go to Safari Preferences, Advanced, and tick the box at the bottom, Show Develop Menu in Menu Bar. That then adds a Develop menu, and under there you can choose to show Web Inspector. Other web browsers seem to have Web Inspector just in the menus by default, but they don't always call it Web Inspector. And of course you can use keystrokes or a contextual menu to call it up more easily. So here's the Web Inspector in the Safari Develop menu. Here in Firefox, you have to look under Tools, Browser Tools, Web Developer Tools. In Chrome, it's under View, Developer, Inspect Elements. So depending what web browser you're using and which platform you're on, you might just have to look around for something like a Web Developer tool or a Web Inspector. Here I've loaded a web page called the Web Inspector window, and I've called up the Web Inspector in Safari on a Mac. The Web Inspector has appeared as a part of the page on the right hand side. There are some controls though. I could dock the Web Inspector to the bottom of a window, like so, or I could detach it into a separate window, like so, but actually I'm going to return it to being on the right hand side of the page. Now when you call it up, you need to be sure that you're in the Elements portion. There are an awful lot of things that you can use this Web Inspector for, but we're looking at the Elements. And you want to make sure that you're looking at the styles. It may be that it's on something else like computed, but come back to styles. Over here, this portion, the HTML/HTML part, refers to the entire web page, and when you hover over it, it actually highlights the entire page. And down in the bottom left of the window, it gives you some information about that as well. Click the disclosure triangle, and it shows you what makes up that web page. Every web page has a head that we're not going to look at, that has information about the web page, and the body, which is what we're actually looking at. And notice when I roll over body, it then highlights, instead of the entire thing, just the body part of it. If I come down and roll over H1, it then highlights the level 1 heading called the Web Inspector window, or I could highlight this paragraph or that paragraph or that one, the image, and luckily that's all we've got on this page, but some web pages have an awful lot of stuff in there. Let's have a look at what we've got. If I now click on the H1 line, it highlights it in the Web Inspector, and over on the right hand side it reveals what styles are actually applying to that level 1 heading, and it tells me where it's getting those styles from. So just to jump around a little bit, over here it says this is a user agent style sheet. User agent is a word for the web browser, and every web browser actually has its own style sheet already built in. Just in case you somehow produce a web page that doesn't have any styles, the web browser needs to have some basic information to know what to do with things. And so the web browser itself suggests that a level 1 heading will have a font size of 2M, and it'll be bold, and some other things I'm not going into. But that's not the only one, because what we've also got is a style sheet named Defaultstyles.css, which is what this web browser is pulling from, and that's where I myself have given it information about how I want these styles to appear. And this one suggests that a level 1 heading, the text should be aligned in the center, and the color of the text should be olive, and in fact that's what we're seeing here. But there are some interesting things here. The web browser has looked at the server and got this copy of the web page in its own hands, as it were. And so now I can say to the web browser, let's say I wanted to change this, and it's not doing anything to the web page on the server. So I could come here and uncheck the box for text align center, and now look what's happened to that heading. It's become left aligned, because we've taken away my instruction to centre it. Now, if somebody else happens to be looking at this very same web page at this very same moment on some other web browser somewhere else in the world, this change won't be reflected in what they see. This isn't changing the actual web page, it's only changing what you're seeing in your web browser right now. Let's put the text align center back by checking the box again. What say we wanted to right align that text? How would that look? Well, I can click on center and I can change that to right. And now, lo and behold, that text is right aligned. Let's put that one back to center, and for those of us in the English speaking world who would normally spell center with a T-R-E, note that you have to use the American spelling of center. Now, another thing about that level 1 heading is that the colour of the text is olive. So again, I could just turn that off, and now it goes back to the default black. Let's check it again. So now it's olive. And the Web Inspector has very helpfully given me this little colour patch here to show me what colour it thinks olive is. Okay. There's a different one called olive drab. Oh, that's a funny kind of green, isn't it? But what say we don't want green at all? What say we want orange? Ugh. Anyway, I can put in orange, and it changes the little colour patch to show me that orange and gives me the word orange, and over on the left hand side you can see that that level 1 heading is now orange. So let's put it back to green. Oh, actually it was olive, wasn't it? Let's put it back to olive, just so that we're only focusing on one thing at a time. Okay, let's try a paragraph. Here we've got several paragraphs of text, 2. And if I roll over the P, then again it shows me which paragraph I'm looking at on the left. If I click on the letter P, the P tag, now over on the right hand side I can see what styles are applying to that. And again we've got a user agent style sheet which has various information I don't want to look at too closely. But we also have my Defaultstyles style sheet, and here we can see that again I've said that text in a paragraph should be navy in colour. So again, if I uncheck that, it goes back to the default black. And notice it's not just applying to that one single paragraph that I've selected, it's applying to all the paragraphs, in this case 2, all the paragraphs on the page. Let's put that back. Now another thing that I've chosen here is the size of the font. And I've chosen to make the font 1.2 rem in size. I'm afraid this is where you're going to have to go and learn a bit about CSS to find out about these things. Do notice though that there's no gap between the 1.2 and the rem, but I can change that if I want to. If I press the up arrow, it jumps to 2.2 rem, and notice how enormous that now is. I'll do the down arrow again. Instead of that, I might simply delete the 2 and change that to, let's say, 4. And now you can see that that text is quite big. Okay. All right. Perhaps I'm happy with that, but I'm thinking that I want to do something else with that text. If I press the return key, it now allows me to enter something else. I'm going to change the line height. And notice how the Web Inspector is helpfully suggesting what this thing should be. So now I can just press Tab to go to the other part of the rule. And line heights are often quite good as just a bit bigger than the size of the text itself. So let's try 1.6, and you don't need to put rem in this case. And now that's put quite a big line height between the lines. That might be a bit big. Let's try 1.5. Okay, let's live with that. And there we go. I typed the semicolon and that finished off that line and gave me a new option. So there are various things that you can do, but notice that applies to all the bits of the web page that are tagged with the P, the paragraph tag, and so it applies to the whole entire web page. I'm thinking all of that's made a bit of a mess of my web page. If I come up here and refresh the web page, it gets rid of all those changes I made and just loads a fresh copy back from the server. And so now I'm looking at this as it was before. That gives you an idea of how you can use the Web Inspector to look behind the scenes on a web page and experiment with some changes which don't actually change the actual copy of the page. They're just what you're looking at in your browser. But let's imagine that you've messed around a bit. Perhaps you've gone onto the Microsoft blog help and got people to give you advice about various aspects of how your blog looks, and now you want to actually put that in for real. Log into your blog and go down to the design section. From there you need to scroll down the page and you'll find what theme you've actually chosen, and you can click this Edit CSS button. You can then put in the specific things that you want for your blog in here. You can see I've got quite a lot on my personal blog, and once you've put in the things that you want, be sure to click the Update CSS button. You get the remark that it's being published, and then once you've finished you can click the back button and return to whatever else you wanted to do. In my experience, you might need to wait a few moments before those changes actually show up on your blog. Once you've done something like this, it's essential that you go to your blog and have a look at it. Refresh the page, make sure that in fact you haven't done some terrible thing that's made it all a huge mess, which has happened to me more often than I care to mention. It happens to everybody. But go check your web page, and then chances are you'll see something else you want to change anyway. So I hope that's given you a few clues about using the Web Inspector. It's introduced you to the notion of HTML tags, to cascading style sheets which hook into those HTML tags, the role of the web browser, and then how to call up the Web Inspector and use it to play around with what might this change, what might that change, what might some other change look like on your website. Good luck.